Hey guys, welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 firearms that I have the hardest time selling in my store, whether in my brick and mortar store or online, and I'm going to talk about the reasons why I think these particular firearms are difficult to sell. So if that sounds interesting to you, please stick around. That's coming up now. Okay guys, before jumping into this, I always like to go over a couple points. First, I am just one gun store owner located in central Indiana. So when I talk about things that do sell well in my store or don't sell well, they should only be considered as a single data point when you're looking at the entire market at large. If you work at or own another gun store in another part of the country and you disagree with some of my picks for things that don't move too well, maybe they sell well in your store, please leave that information below. I find it interesting and I know my viewers find it interesting as well. Also, if you own any of the firearms that are going to be in this video, please remember I am not intending to dig on or criticize the firearms, so no need to try and defend them in the comment section. That is not the point of this video. There are usually many reasons why a firearm does not sell well. Could just be because it's my location, could be the price, there could be a lot of things beyond its quality as a firearm. So again, remember this video, if you're considering even buying one of these, I'm not trying to criticize its quality, it's just they don't move too well, which is something that may be considered if you think you may want to resell it down the road. So with those points out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this, starting off with the Ruger LCR revolver. Now, Ruger released this to the market about 7 or 8 years ago. They come in tons of different calibers. Most commonly, you see them in .38 Special, .357 Magnum, and 9mm, although they make them in .22, .327 Federal, and other calibers. Now, the LCRX is the version with the hammer. The LCR is the shrouded hammer, and so this is a double action only. Now, one of the main selling points about this was the anti-stacking, trigger. So they have sort of nice, smooth camming action in here on the trigger, which makes it easily stageable. And as far as double action triggers go on revolvers, this one is really, really nice. Now, it does have a polymer external frame, nice sort of gutter sights on the rear, and I've seen these with the fiber optic sights. This one's just a standard blacked out ramp sight. Overall, a good quality revolver. Now, one of the reasons I think that these do not sell too well, whether we are selling them new or used, is their price point. These do sell brand new between about $500 and $600, and on the used market, I see people on GunBroker posting and sometimes selling them for about the $400 to $500 range. Now, whenever we post one of these new for $500 to $600 or used for $400 to $500, they tend to sit for a long time. Again, I think the price and also its place in the market leaves a lot of buyers to go towards other things. It's kind of between options. For example, this is a pretty decent size revolver if you're talking about concealed carry. It's larger than other things like a J-frame Smith & Wesson. This is part of their Airlight series, and although this has sort of the polymer / metal frame, this is all metal, but it's an alloy, and it is about it's about the same weight. I could weigh them, but if just holding them here in my hands, they feel to be roughly the same weight, but this is definitely a smaller footprint. So you're going to have something a little bit easier to conceal here. Now, you do have a 5-round capacity on the Smith & Wesson. You also have a 5-round capacity on the Ruger. So you're getting really no benefit on the Ruger there either. Now, on price, these brand new are in the $4 to $5 range, and used they're in the $3 to $4. So they're $100 less. And also when it comes to revolvers, there tends to be more of a following on Smith products than there are on Rugers. Although Ruger is a very good and respected company, undoubtedly Smith & Wesson is typically the name in revolvers. So a lot of buyers, especially first-time buyers looking for that concealed carry option, looking between these two, the weight's the same, the capacity's the same. The Smith & Wesson, which has a bigger name in the revolver world, is less expensive, and it's smaller and more compact. Now, if you want to go with something that's a concealed carry but a little bit larger, there are other things that come even from Ruger's line, like the SP101. Now, this is a full steel frame and is undoubtedly heavier. It's also a 5-round capacity, but this you can get into like a 357, and with that heavy frame, you're going to have a lot of recoil control. There are other options out on the revolver line if you're talking about like the Colt Cobra, which again is a little bit pricier, but the SP101 is going to be roughly about $100 more than the LCR pistol or the LCR revolver. So there are just a lot of other options. It's kind of like in between a small J frame and a standard size, like a small concealed carry SP101. The capacity is no different, but the price is right there in the middle of the road of other revolvers. If you're more on a budget, there's there's things like the Taurus Model 85, which is typically around the $300 mark, less used, and it's in a full steel frame, but they have the Defender series that's a lighter weight and about this size as well, at roughly about 2/3 of the price. So I just think the LCR has a difficult time finding its place in the market. Now again, I know there are buyers and owners of the LCR. There's no criticism of this revolver. This is a fine revolver. It is nice, lightweight, ergonomic, and does have, in my opinion, out of the three, the best double action trigger, but it's just with that price point. I think if these were new at like $399 and used at $299, they would sell way better. But anyway, that's just my opinion, and again, my sort of guess on why they don't sell too well in my store. All right, guys, up next is a Sig P365. Now, it is a specific P365. I don't know if you guys can guess based on your guys' experience with the P365. And you're probably saying, Chris, on your videos, you've said often that the P365 is an awesome seller, and it is, except for this one. And what it is, I know the anticipation is killing you. This is the P365 SAS. For whatever reason, in my store, I have a really hard time moving this pistol, especially when they're looking at the other P365 options. Now, for those who don't know, the SAS is the Sig anti-snag. What you have is a turn-style takedown lever that requires a tool, whether it's a screwdriver, a penny, the rim of a bullet. Also, it has a low-profile slide release where you really have to dig in with your thumb to get on top of it. You can't there's no kind of protruded ledge here that you can push down on, so you kind of have to turn your hand and dig down on it, which is especially hard if the slide's locked back on an empty magazine. Of course, obviously, you can just remove the mag and pull the slide back. You know, there it goes. You have these bullseye style rear sight, which is a fiber optic. It keeps no front sight here on the front end, and with the sight, you just look through a small open window just below the top of the slide line, and inside you get a really cool sort of circle and dot type of appearance. It's like a non-electrical red dot, you know, or an RMR or something like that. Now, the criticism about these, first of all, with the takedown lever, having to use a tool in disassembly is always a negative, in at least my opinion, and I know a lot of people agree. You can say, well, you always have a round on you, you always have a penny or something you can use to get into that, but I always like the ability to be able to fully take apart the firearm without the need of a tool. I always find the need of a tool being a negative. That's just me, and I know a lot of people agree who I've talked to when they look at these. The next thing that people, and probably the number one thing people don't like about this, is that really low profile slide release. It is really tough to get in there and have to manipulate that. You really can't just slide it down with the meat of your thumb. You have to dig your nail in on top of it to get it, and you see what happens to my grip when I do that. So trying to quickly manipulate the firearm that way is not, you know, a lot of people don't like that. And again, there may be some of you out there who have no problem with that, but again, this is just a sort of a generality. The next thing is the sights. The sights are a really interesting feature on this, but one problem with the sort of the fiber optic on here is if you cover it up, you're losing your sight picture, or if it's dark, you're losing your sight picture. You are entirely determined, or you need light to be able to use that. Now, yeah, there are a lot of firearms out there that come with standard 3-dot sights that also require a light source to be able to use. However, a lot of firearms like that, you can replace it with night sights if you decide you want to do that later on down the road. To my knowledge, that is not possible on the SAS, but you guys can correct me. I don't know if this is about the same sight. Like the XL comes with the sight plate back here. I don't know if this is the same sort of general size where you can change that out or not. I don't think it is, but that's a general thing. Now, the P365 is an excellent firearm. It is one that I really like, and actually the P365s in general are some of the best sellers in my store. But when people are looking at this compared to the XL, compared to the standard model, compared to the X model, they almost always go to those models. The sights, a lot of people think are cool, but when they start using them in practice, you know, I see a lot of people bring these back and sell them. I do get these in used pretty frequently, and they just kind of pile up on me. I actually think I have 3 in stock right now, and, you know, they just don't seem to move. But there it is. One that just does not move too well for me is the P365 SAS. Okay, up next is a pistol that if you were thinking about purchasing, you should definitely look for it on the used market instead of the new market, as the resale value on these is not very good. This is a Arms model PM9 9mm. It is a semi-automatic single stack 9mm pistol. Now, the trigger on these is pretty long and squishy, and it does have a pretty long reset. but that is really inherently the safety feature of this, is there is no external safety. Now, I actually am a big fan of these pistols. In fact, I carry off and on a Car CM9, and I switch it out with my Shield, my first generation Smith & Wesson Shield from time to time, because I do like the overall size. It's very easy for deep concealment. You know, when I'm in the summertime, if I need something, you know, that I want to pocket carry even, it's very easy to conceal. I've always had really good luck with mine. It's always had really good reliability. But why does the PM9 seem to not sell very well? Well, in my opinion, I think it is a combination of price and cannibalization by other products in its own line. Now, as I mentioned, the CM9, for those of you who don't know, looks just like the PM9. In fact, if you set a CM9 and a PM9 side by side and try and tell the differences, that would be like looking at one of those children's picture games where you have the two slightly different pictures and you're trying to point out the differences between the two. That's what it's like when you're looking at the CM9 and the PM9. The PM9 has a little bit finer machining, more attention to machining detail on the slide. It does have a dovetailed front sight, so you can drift it for drift adjustment, but the CM9 also has a dovetailed a rear sight, so you can drift adjust that anyway. The front sight on the CM9 is polymer, the front sight on the PM9 is metal, and the only other difference that I can think of is the barrel on the PM9 is polygonal rifled, whereas on the CM9 it is traditional rifling. Now with the polygonal rifling, you're going to get a better gas seal and more consistent velocity, but in the realm of concealed carry, where you're likely going to be 7 yards away from your target or closer in a defensive scenario, having that additional accuracy or range on a pistol of this class is not necessarily a more desired feature. Now, all those benefits are nice, but when it comes to the CM9 and the PM9 is twice the price. These are about $600 to $700 new, whereas the CM9 is between about $300 and $400 new. CM9s used, you typically find between $200 and $300. PM9s used, I have a hard time selling these things for over $400. I'm typically below $400 on these, and they still sit. When you're talking about doubling your price, having a slightly better barrel and a dovetailed front sight and maybe a little bit nicer stylizing on the machining is not enough to justify somebody putting an additional $300 or $400 into their purchase. Now again, if those benefits or if those differences are worth it to you and you see yourself wanting to spend that extra money to get those features, definitely, you know, that's totally fine. Everybody can put their money where they want to put their money, and it is still a good gun. It is just because there is something just like it with slightly less features on it for half the price. I think that's the decision most people make. That's the decision I've made on it. And when people bring these in, you know, and I make them an offer on them used, I typically get the deer in the headlights look because I know they dropped $600 or $700 on them, but I have a hard time even selling it for $4 used. So, you know, obviously my offer is below $4 or less than half of what they paid for it. So whether you're selling to a dealer or to a private individual, you're going to take quite a hit on the PM9 if you're buying it used. But that's, again, just my experience here. There may be other gun stores in other parts of the country that may very much disagree with me on that. But anyway, there is that one, the Car PM9. Okay, up next is one I actually quite like, and I've always been confused as to why these have not sold better, at least in my store. And that is a Beretta PX4 Storm series. This is a 9mm compact. They make this in a subcompact and a full size as well, and then the CX4 series is the carbine. I guess you could call it the carbine variation of this. Now this is a 9mm. This is double single action. It does have a decocker safety, and it's interesting in the way that it incorporates a rotating to lock barrel, similar to what you might see on a Springfield M1A or an M1 Garand or something like that. It keeps the barrel locking and unlocking in a very linear, straightforward position, so your recoil impulse is forward and backward, as opposed to on a tilting barrel, which might tend to give the barrel a slightly upward trajectory under recoil, especially with higher calibers. Now, it's an interesting design. The price point new was always around the $500 mark. Now it's inching up to around the $600 mark. And used, you typically find them between about $300 and $400, so quite a bit of a difference. Even when we price these things at like $399 in good condition in the box, they tend to sit around and don't get much attention. Now, some of my guesses would be, and some, I guess, from listening to customers, is probably one of the biggest detractors of this is the aesthetics. It does undoubtedly have a very weird, sort of futuristic and unconventional look and design and feel. And even though we say it all the time, the aesthetics of the firearm are the least important thing. It's all about how it feels and how comfortable it is. As somebody who runs a gun store, I will tell you, aesthetics are a big driving point in a lot of people at least wanting to initially pick up the firearm. If the firearm looks cool or unique or attractive to a buyer, that will at least get them to pick it up and put it in their hand. If they look at it in the shelf and it just looks off-putting or ugly, or it just doesn't look like the type of style that they like, they generally won't even pick it up and give it a try. But this is one that has really good recoil impulse, really good controllability. But I do see a lot of people just sort of pass over it in the case and look at other things like M&Ps and XDs and Glocks that carry more of a traditional line. The other sort of thing that might be a detractor on this is the fact that it is a double single action. A lot of people in the $500 polymer frame price point tend to like more of a striker fire type of action. It's just easier, lower learning curve on it, especially to a newer shooter, having to think about the double and single action, the differences in the trigger pulls and the decocker safety and all of that. So that could be an issue as well. And also with the price point of between $500 and $600, there are a ton of competitors in this market space, this sort of position in the handgun lineup that the Storm sits in. So it is competing with the M&P line, the XD line, the Glock line, the Ruger, well, it used to be the SR9, but now the American line, a Security 9 series, all the Taurus polymer frames that are coming out at an even cheaper price point. So it is a very crowded market, and to have slightly more complicated functions and a very unconventional design is probably why this one just does not sell too well. And if you are looking at getting a Storm, definitely check out the used market because of that. Okay, last but not least is one that many people in the AK community are going to know all too well. This is an IO Interordnance Inc. Sporter AK variant of rifle. Now this one has been on the market for quite some time, but was discontinued by IO in 2017, mainly due to bad publicity and controversy in my opinion. For those of you who make the rounds on YouTube, you may know the channel AK Operators Union, run by Rob Ski. He's known for doing pretty extensive and exhaustive tests on the different AK pattern rifles out there on the market today. He also touches on other variants as well, but mainly the AK is where he spends his time. He had gotten an IO rifle and did a 5,000 round test video, which it made it just north of about 1,000 rounds before it started having catastrophic failures and the test had to be abandoned. So that was back in 2015. Now, once he put out the video, they got a really weird response from IO, who was very defensive, and it ended up turning into somewhat of a back and forth between the two. And of course, a lot of Rob Ski's followers who are all very deep into the AK world sort of shunned the brand IO. Basically due to the very bad quality of the build, and also because of the poor business practices and representations and what happened with that sort of back and forth. So just a couple years later, they would drop the product from distribution and manufacturing, and it somewhat just become sort of a weird, sort of the unwanted stepchild of the AK community ever since. Now, they did try to rectify a lot of the QC issues in the latter years of production. Ones like this, you can tell the rivets are a lot better. It does have a very smooth action. Everything seems to have good fit and feel. But still, these, when you find them on the used market, they are plagued with that poor reputation that they did receive during that time period. So when you see these moving, they're typically priced at about the $500 or $600 mark, especially because other AKs are going at about $1,000 plus now. Even getting up into a Wasser, you're kind of even used. You're $700-800 plus. So to get into something that's about half the going rate of the other traditional AKs, this is something that's still a viable option for people, especially on a budget. You could get lucky and get a good one, but if you're unlucky and get a bad one, you at least have $500 in parts. So there's that for you. But because of that sort of stigma against these do tend to sit around a little while. And of course, when we do get in IO AKs and sell them, we try and go through them and make sure there's no, mushrooming of the bolt head and all the rivets look good and everything like that, so that hopefully the end user does not have one that's in bad shape. But we have had these come through that just you can tell they're on their way out, and we typically avoid them. But even when we get them, we price them kind of low just to sell to that lower end of the market. But there is that one, and Interordnance, or the IO Inc. Sporter AK. All right, guys, well, that's all I have for you today on these. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button, and please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. With that, guys, I'm going to leave you off there. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.